Chapter 17, we start to get to the heart of object-oriented programming. We're going to learn about methods. So we've learned it in a class. So in terms of a class, at this point, we've learned how to define a class. We've put attributes in a class. So for example, today is defined to be of class weather, and we can put in an attribute called date, temperature, relative humidity, wind speed, wind direction. But now we're going to learn how to define a method. So I want to be able to print out this weather variable, and I could define a procedure to do that, but I actually want to make it part of the class so that a weather object has associated with it a way to print out the data from the weather. So this is called a method. We define it to be a procedure, print weather. There's this interesting variable here, self, that's always a part of any method that you define in a class. And we're going to talk about what self does. But we can call self just like it's an instance of the class weather. So we're going to print self.date, self.temp, self.relative humidity, self.wind speed, and self.wind direction. Now you may notice that PyCharm is complaining about the fact that I have this attribute here that I haven't defined before, and we're going to see later on a way to get around that, but for right now we're not going to worry about it. So I'm keeping track of these 5 different attributes: date, temp, relative humidity, wind speed, and wind direction, and I just want to be able to print those out again. So what does self do? Well, when I declare today to be of class weather, then I can give values to those attributes. And then because I've defined this method for variables of class weather, if I want to print the weather for today, I can just do a today.printWeather command. And when I do that, it automatically calls print weather with the value self, which in this case is going to be a reference to the variable today. So when we pass in self, it literally means self. You're calling the variable, you're passing in the variable that you call it with. So again, self in this case references today, and then this will print out today.date, today.temp, today.relative humidity, today.wind speed, and today.wind direction. So let's go ahead and run that. And you see that it prints out all of that information. So we can define other kinds of methods too. If you are looking at weather, then there's some other things that you might want to do. Like I have defined the temperature being degrees Fahrenheit, but you might want to know the degrees in Celsius. So there's a little conversion here. If I want to, I can convert my temperature to degrees Celsius. I looked up a formula for wind chill, so I can compute the wind chill based on the temperature and the wind speed. And again, notice that each of these includes that variable self. And then I can reference attributes of self whenever I'm calling these methods. So for Celsius, the conversion is to take the temperature, subtract 32 degrees, and multiply by 5/9. For the wind chill, the formula is a little bit more complicated. If you know the temperature and the wind speed, I actually just set those equal to 2 shorter variables because this formula gets really long if you type out self.temperature and self.wind speed everywhere those variables are. Anyways, there's the formula for the wind chill. This formula was actually derived pretty recently, I think in 2000, by a group of scientists. So the idea here is that when you define a variable to be of type weather, of class weather, you should get a lot of functionality that comes along with that. You should have the functionality to store the date at which you're recording the weather. I could have a time in here. You should be able to store the temperature, all those variables, but you should also be able to compute wind chill. You should be able to compute Celsius. You should have a method that prints this information out for you. And it's not something that you should have to construct on your own. The class does it for you. Now, that may seem like an odd thing to say since I wrote the class, but we will see, we'll explore that topic a little bit further in the future. Okay, so now notice that in print weather, I've actually added at the end a computation for the wind chill. And so the way that I call wind chill in print weather is I reference the variable self and just call wind chill by doing .wind chill. So this is a method for a weather variable, and use the dot notation. So other than that, the code down here is exactly the same as we had before, and we get that. Okay, so one of the things, or the big thing for this chapter right now is learning about methods and how they apply. And then in the next couple of videos, we're going to explore how having a class like this can make your coding a lot nicer, a lot prettier, and a lot cleaner.